The banker's daughter stood on the porch of the Ardmore First National Bank, her silk dress catching the Oklahoma wind, and told Juniper Emmett that her simple cotton skirts and plain way of speaking made her unfit for polite society. It was August 1883, and the summer heat pressed down on the dusty streets like a weight, but the cold dismissal in Catherine Wells's voice cut deeper than any winter frost ever could. Juniper had only wanted to join the church social committee, to help with the fall harvest celebration, but apparently her country manners and lack of sophistication disqualified her from such refined company. Juniper turned away from the bank, her cheeks burning not from the sun but from humiliation. She was 22 years old, and she had heard variations of this rejection her entire life. Her mother had died when she was just 8, leaving her to be raised by her father on their small ranch outside town. She could rope a calf, mend a fence, cook a decent meal, and read well enough to get through the newspaper, but she had never learned the art of fancy conversation or the elaborate social graces that seemed so important to the town's elite families. She walked down Main Street with her head held high despite the shame churning in her stomach. The general store needed supplies picked up, and she would not let Catherine Wells's cruel words keep her from her errands. Ardmore was growing fast, with the railroad bringing new people and new money to southern Oklahoma territory. The streets were busier than they had been just a year ago, with construction happening on every corner. Progress, everyone called it, though Juniper wondered if progress had to mean that simple country folk like herself no longer had a place. The general store was crowded when she entered, and she waited patiently while Mr. Henderson finished with the customers ahead of her. She studied the list her father had written out that morning, his handwriting shaky now that arthritis had settled into his joints. 20 pounds of flour, sugar, coffee, salt, a new blade for the saw, simple necessities for a simple life. Miss Emmett. Mr. Henderson greeted her warmly when her turn came. He at least had never treated her as less than. "How's your father doing? His hands are giving him trouble, but he manages," Juniper replied. "We need these items when you have a moment. I will get these together for you. Should have it ready in about 20 minutes if you want to wait or come back." "I will wait, thank you." She moved to the side to let other customers approach the counter and found herself near the window, watching the street outside. A group of cowboys rode past, likely heading to one of the saloons. Ranch hands came to town regularly, spending their wages on whiskey and card games before riding back out to whatever spread employed them. Juniper recognized a few faces but not others. The summer cattle drives brought temporary workers through constantly. One rider caught her attention, though she could not say exactly why. He sat differently in the saddle than the others, straighter somehow, more deliberate in his movements. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. Nothing about him suggested wealth or status, yet something in the way he carried himself spoke of quiet confidence. The group dismounted in front of the Silver Dollar Saloon, and the cowboy she had noticed paused to adjust his horse's bridle before following the others inside. Even that small gesture, the care he took with his animal, seemed to set him apart. Daydreaming Juniper. She turned to find her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, smiling at her kindly. The older woman had been friends with Juniper's mother and had always treated her with warmth. "Just watching the town grow," Juniper said. "Seems like more people every week." "Indeed. Sometimes I miss the quiet days, but I suppose we cannot stop change." Mrs. Patterson patted her arm. "I heard what happened at the bank earlier. Catherine Wells has always been too big for her britches, if you ask me. You are worth 10 of her, dear." Juniper felt tears prick her eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That means more than you know. Your mother would be proud of the woman you have become. Do not let anyone tell you different." The older woman squeezed her hand before moving toward the counter for her own purchases. By the time Mr. Henderson had Juniper's supplies ready, the afternoon had grown even hotter. She loaded the heavy bags into the back of the wagon her father had let her take that morning, grateful he had decided she should drive rather than ride. The supplies would have been impossible to manage on horseback. The ride back to the ranch took nearly an hour, following the road south out of Ardmore before turning west onto the rough track that led to their property. The Emmett Ranch was modest by any standard, just 160 acres her father had claimed years ago, with a small herd of cattle and a few horses. They made enough to get by, nothing more, but it was home. The house her father had built was simple but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a main room that served as kitchen and parlor both, and a porch where they could sit on summer evenings and watch the sunset. Her father came out to help unload when she pulled up, despite her protests about his hands. "I am not an invalid yet, daughter," he said gruffly, though she could see him wince as he gripped a bag of flour. "How was town?" "Busy. The railroad is bringing more people every day." She decided not to mention the incident at the bank. Her father would only get upset on her behalf, and there was nothing to be done about it anyway. They worked together to put the supplies away, then Juniper started on supper while her father went to check on the cattle. She made a simple meal of fried potatoes, beans, and cornbread, the same sort of food she had been cooking since she was 12 years old. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress someone like Catherine Wells, but honest food that filled the belly and sustained a working man. They ate together as the sun set, talking about ranch business and the weather. Rain would be welcome soon. The summer had been drier than usual. Her father mentioned that he might need to hire someone to help with the fence repairs along the eastern boundary, work that was getting beyond what his painful hands could manage. "We could ask if any of the ranch hands in town might want extra work," Juniper suggested. "Plenty of cowboys looking for wages this time of year." "I will think on it," her father said. "Money is tight, but those fences will not fix themselves." That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the crickets sing outside her window, Juniper thought about Catherine Wells's words. Simple, unsophisticated, unrefined. The words had been meant as insults, but were they really so terrible? She was simple, she supposed. She did not know how to make clever small talk or which fork to use at a fancy dinner. She could not play piano or paint watercolors. But she could deliver a calf in the middle of the night, tend a sick horse back to health, make a garden grow in Oklahoma's stubborn red soil. Were those skills so worthless? She thought too of the cowboy she had seen in town, the one who had paused to check his horse's bridle. Something about that simple gesture had struck her as kind, as indicating a man who paid attention to details that mattered. She wondered idly what his name was, where he was from, but the thoughts were idle curiosity, nothing more. She would likely never see him again in a town as busy as Ardmore had become. The next morning brought Sunday, and Juniper dressed in her best dress, the blue cotton one she had made herself last spring, for church services. Her father had been raised Methodist and maintained that tradition, even though his attendance had become sporadic as his health declined. Juniper went faithfully every week, partly from genuine belief, and partly because it was one of the few social activities available to her. The Ardmore Methodist Church stood on the north end of town, a white building with a tall steeple that could be seen from miles away. Juniper arrived early, as was her habit, and took a seat toward the back. She watched as the pews filled with familiar faces. The Patterson family, the Henderson family from the general store, the doctor and his wife, various ranch families from the surrounding area. She also saw Catherine Wells and her parents take seats near the front. Catherine wearing a dress that must have been ordered from back east, far too elaborate for a simple Sunday service. Reverend Thomas gave a sermon about compassion and kindness, about treating others as you would wish to be treated. Juniper wondered if Catherine Wells heard a word of it, or if she was too busy showing off her fancy dress to pay attention to spiritual matters. After the service, people gathered outside to chat, forming small groups based on social standing and familiarity. Juniper found herself standing alone as usual until Mrs. Patterson came over with her daughter-in-law. "Juniper, dear, have you met Sarah? She married my son Michael last month." "Congratulations," Juniper said warmly, shaking the young woman's hand. "Welcome to Ardmore." Sarah smiled, though she looked a bit overwhelmed. "Thank you. Everyone has been very kind. Well, almost everyone." Mrs. Patterson made a disapproving sound. "Sarah had the misfortune of meeting Catherine Wells yesterday. That girl told her that her traveling suit was too plain for proper society." "Catherine seems to have opinions about everyone's clothing," Juniper said dryly. "I would not take it personally. You are a ranch girl, are you not?" Sarah asked. "Michael's mother told me you grew up on a homestead." "I did, and still live there with my father. We have a small cattle operation south of town." "I grew up on a farm in Kansas," Sarah said, her face brightening. "My parents raised wheat. I was so worried everyone here would be sophisticated city people who would think I was a country bumpkin." "Well, some people might," Juniper admitted. "But most folks in Ardmore are good, honest people who care more about character than appearances. At least, that has been my experience with the people worth knowing." The three women talked for a while longer, and Juniper felt some of the loneliness that had been pressing on her lift slightly. Perhaps Sarah could be a friend, someone who understood what it was like to be simple country people in a town that was trying hard to become something more refined. As Juniper prepared to head back to the ranch, she noticed a commotion near the hitching posts. Several cowboys were mounting up, apparently having attended the service, and one of them was having trouble with a horse that was dancing and tossing its head. The other men laughed and made jokes, but one cowboy, the same one she had noticed yesterday outside the general store, stepped forward to help. She was close enough now to hear him speak in a low, calm voice as he approached the skittish horse. He did not grab at the reins or make any sudden movements. Instead, he just stood near the animal's shoulder, talking quietly until the horse settled. Then he checked the saddle and found that the cinch had been fastened too tightly, pinching the horse's skin. "No wonder he was acting up," the cowboy said, loosening the strap and adjusting it properly. "You have to pay attention to how tight you pull it, especially in this heat. Horse swells up when he is nervous, then the saddle gets too tight when he relaxes." "Thanks, Vaughn," the other cowboy said, looking sheepish. "I should have checked that. Now you know for next time." The one called Vaughn handed back the reins and walked to his own horse, a sturdy bay that stood calmly waiting. Juniper found herself watching as he swung into the saddle with an easy grace and rode off with the others. Vaughn. So that was his name, and clearly he was a man who knew horses and treated them with respect. She filed the information away in her mind, though she could not have said why it seemed important. The following week passed in the usual rhythm of ranch work. Juniper tended the garden, cooked meals, helped her father with the cattle, and tried not to think about Catherine Wells's cruel words or the fact that she would likely spend her entire life alone, because no man of any standing would want a simple ranch girl for a wife. She was not desperate for marriage, exactly, but she was human enough to want companionship, to dream sometimes of having a family of her own. On Friday, her father brought up the subject of hiring help again. The fences really could not wait any longer, and there was also wood to chop for winter, repairs needed on the barn, 100 tasks that required strength and mobility he no longer possessed. "I will ride into town tomorrow and see if I can find someone willing to work for fair wages," Juniper said. "It should not be too difficult with all the cowboys passing through. Make sure whoever you hire seems honest," her father cautioned. "I do not want some drifter who will disappear with our tools or cause trouble." Saturday morning found Juniper back in Ardmore, but this time she headed not to the general store but to the Silver Dollar Saloon. It was not proper for a woman to enter such an establishment, but the saloon was where ranch hands gathered to look for work, and she needed to hire someone. She tied her horse outside and pushed through the swinging doors, her chin held high despite the stares she received. The saloon was dim and smelled of stale beer and tobacco smoke. A dozen men sat at various tables, playing cards or nursing drinks even though it was barely 10 in the morning. Conversations died as everyone turned to look at the woman who had just entered. Juniper walked to the bar where the proprietor, a heavy-set man named Charlie, stood polishing glasses. "I am looking to hire someone for ranch work," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Fence repair, wood chopping, general labor, fair wages for honest work. Anyone interested can speak with me outside." She turned and walked back out before anyone could comment on her presence, grateful to escape the stuffy interior. Several men followed her out, some clearly more interested in ogling her than in working, but a few seemed genuinely interested in the job. She was interviewing a middle-aged man with whiskey on his breath when a familiar voice spoke behind her. "What kind of fence work?" She turned to find Vaughn standing there, his hat in his hands. Up close, she could see that he had dark hair that needed cutting and brown eyes that looked directly at her without the leering quality some of the other men's gazes had held. He was perhaps 27 or 28, she guessed, with the weathered skin of someone who spent his life outdoors. "Posts need replacing along our eastern boundary," she said. "Some of the rails, too, and other work around the ranch that needs doing. My father's arthritis makes it difficult for him to manage everything himself." "How many acres?" 160. "Small operation, just the two of us and about 50 head of cattle." Vaughn nodded slowly. "How long is this work likely to take?" "A few weeks, possibly a month depending on how much gets done each day. We can pay 25 cents a day plus meals." "That is fair." He looked at her directly. "I am interested if you are still looking for someone." One of the other men, the one with whiskey breath, laughed. "You sure you want to work for a woman, Novak? Might hurt your reputation." Vaughn did not even glance at the speaker. "Work is work, and Miss Emmett, Juniper Emmett. Miss Emmett is offering fair wages for honest labor. My reputation can handle it." He looked back at her. "When do you want me to start?" "Monday morning, if that suits you. The ranch is about an hour south of town on the road toward Springer, then west on Cottonwood Creek. Small house with a red barn, you cannot miss it. I will be there at sunrise." He settled his hat back on his head and gave her a small nod before walking back toward his horse. Juniper sent the other applicants away and headed home, feeling oddly satisfied with the transaction. Something about Vaughn Novak seemed steady, reliable. The way he had helped that other cowboy with his horse, the way he had spoken to the animal, the way he had looked her in the eye without presumption or disrespect. These were all signs of good character, or so she hoped. Her father would be relieved to have the help regardless. That evening she told her father about hiring Vaughn, and while he had some concerns about bringing a stranger onto the property, he agreed they had little choice. The work needed doing, and they needed help to do it. "Just be careful," he cautioned. You will be here alone with this man while I am out checking cattle. I can handle myself, Papa, Juniper said, though she appreciated his concern. Besides, he seemed like a decent sort. Monday morning arrived with a clear sky and the promise of another hot day. Juniper was up before dawn, making breakfast and packing food for midday. She wanted to make sure their new hired hand had enough to eat. A working man needed substantial meals. Vaughn arrived just as the sun broke over the horizon, riding his bay horse and leading a pack mule loaded with tools. He dismounted near the barn and waited for Juniper to come out before approaching the house. "Morning, Miss Emmett," he said. "I brought my own tools, but if you have specific ones you want me to use, I am happy to oblige." "Morning, Mr. Novak. My father is out with the cattle, but he should be back soon. I can show you the fence line that needs work, and you can assess what materials you will need." She led him east across the property, pointing out the sections of fence that were in the worst condition. Vaughn examined each problem area carefully, testing posts and rails, making mental notes. "This will take some time," he said finally. "Some of these posts are rotted clear through. They will need to be pulled and replaced entirely, and that is hard work in this soil. Can you manage it?" "Yes, madam. I have done plenty of fence work in my time. I will start with the worst sections and work my way along. Do you have lumber, or do I need to cut posts? We have some lumber stored in the barn, but you may need to cut additional posts. There is a stand of timber along the creek where my father usually harvests wood." They walked back to the barn together, and Juniper showed him where the supplies were stored. Her father returned shortly after and introduced himself, sizing up Vaughn with a practiced eye. "You know ranch work?" Her father asked bluntly. "Yes, sir. I have been working ranches since I was 14 years old. Grew up in Texas, worked my way north. I know cattle, horses, fences, and most anything else that needs doing on a property like this. Why are you looking for day work instead of steady employment?" Vaughn met his gaze steadily. "I had steady work until last month. The Bar H ranch where I was working got sold to an Eastern investment company. They brought in their own crew and let most of us go. I have been taking odd jobs since, trying to decide if I want to stay in Oklahoma territory or move on." Her father seemed satisfied with this answer. "Well, the work is yours if you want it. Juniper will bring you water and food at midday. We eat supper around sunset if you want to join us, or you can head back to town each night, whichever suits you." "I appreciate the offer of supper, Mr. Emmett. It would save me the ride back and forth." "You are welcome to bed down in the barn if you like," Juniper found herself offering. "It would save your horse the extra miles too." Vaughn looked surprised by the offer but nodded. "That is kind of you. I will take you up on that if it is not too much trouble." And so it was settled. Vaughn set to work on the fences, and Juniper returned to her own tasks, trying not to watch him from the kitchen window as she went about her morning chores. There was something compelling about the way he worked, methodical and thorough, never rushing but never wasting motion either. He treated each task as if it mattered, as if a fence post deserved his full attention and effort. At midday, she brought him water and cold biscuits with ham, along with some pickles from her garden. He had removed his shirt in the heat, and she tried not to stare at his sun-browned shoulders as he gratefully accepted the food. "This is much appreciated, Miss Emmett," he said. "Good food and plenty of it. You are working hard. You need to keep your strength up." He smiled then, a genuine expression that reached his eyes and transformed his serious face into something warm. "Your father is lucky to have you looking after things. This is a well-maintained ranch for just 2 people." The compliment pleased her more than it probably should have. "Thank you. We do our best." She left him to his meal and went back to the house, but his words stayed with her. He had noticed the work she did, the care she took with the property. Such recognition felt valuable in a way that fancy dresses and elaborate manners never had. That evening, Vaughn joined them for supper, and Juniper served pot roast with potatoes and carrots, along with fresh bread she had baked that afternoon. The conversation was quiet but comfortable, with her father asking about Vaughn's experience and Vaughn answering readily. He spoke of various ranches he had worked, different parts of Texas and Oklahoma, lessons learned about cattle and horses and the land itself. "You have a gift with animals," her father observed. Juniper mentioned she saw you helping someone with a difficult horse in town. Vaughn shrugged. "Horses are honest creatures. They do not play games or put on airs. You treat them right and they will do the same for you. I respect that." "I feel the same about most animals," Juniper said. "They are often better company than people." "That has been my experience as well," Vaughn agreed, and something in his tone suggested he had his own stories of disappointment with human nature. After supper, Vaughn thanked them for the meal and headed to the barn to settle in for the night. Juniper cleaned up the dishes while her father sat on the porch smoking his evening pipe. "He seems like a good man," her father said when she joined him outside. "Honest, hard-working. You could do worse." "Papa," Juniper felt her cheeks heat, "I just hired him 2 days ago." "I have eyes, daughter. I see the way you look at him and the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. I am just saying, if something were to develop, I would not object. You deserve happiness, and that young man seems like he might be capable of providing it." Juniper did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just sat beside her father and watched the stars come out over their simple, honest land. The days developed into a pattern. Vaughn worked on the fences and other projects. Juniper managed the household and garden. Her father tended the cattle. At midday and in the evening, they came together for meals, and gradually the conversations grew longer and more personal. Juniper learned that Vaughn's parents had died of fever when he was young, that he had been raised by an uncle who worked cattle in South Texas, that he had been on his own since he was 16. He had never had much schooling but had taught himself to read and write, and he loved books when he could get his hands on them. "I have some books in the house," Juniper said one evening. "Nothing fancy, but you are welcome to borrow them if you like." His face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I would appreciate that greatly. It has been a while since I had anything new to read." She lent him a volume of poetry that had belonged to her mother, and the next evening he spoke about the poems with an insight that surprised her. He understood metaphor and imagery, could discuss the emotion behind the words. Here was an unschooled cowboy with more genuine appreciation for literature than most of the supposedly refined people in Ardmore. 2 weeks into his employment, they had a conversation that would stay with Juniper for a long time. They were sitting on the porch after supper, her father having already gone to bed. The evening was warm, and the crickets sang their familiar chorus. "May I ask you something personal, Miss Emmett?" Vaughn said quietly. "You may, though you should call me Juniper. We have shared enough meals now to dispense with such formality." "Juniper, then, and you should call me Vaughn." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "In town, I have heard people say things about you." "Nothing bad," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Just that you keep to yourself, that you do not socialize much with the town folk. I wondered why. You seem like a fine person to me." Juniper sighed. "The truth is, the fine people of Ardmore do not think much of me. I am too simple for their tastes. I do not dress fashionably. I do not make clever conversation. I do not know how to navigate their social expectations. A few weeks ago, the banker's daughter told me I was unfit for polite society because of my plain ways." Vaughn was quiet for a long moment. "That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard." "Is it?" "Yes. His voice was firm. There is nothing wrong with being simple. In fact, I would argue that simple is better. You know who you are. You do not put on airs or pretend to be something you are not. You work hard, you care for your father, you show kindness even to a drifter like me. Those are the things that matter, not whether you wear silk dresses or use the right fork at dinner. Juniper felt tears prick her eyes. You really believe that? I do. He turned to look at her directly. Simple love is the truest kind there is, Juniper. The same is true of simple living, simple honesty. People who need fancy trappings and complicated rules are usually trying to hide something or prove something. But a person who can live simply, who can be content with honest work and honest companionship, that is someone of real value. Simple love is the truest kind, she repeated softly. I like that. I have lived a simple life all my years, Vaughn continued. I own what I can carry on my horse and mule. I work for my wages, I treat people and animals with respect, and I try to leave places better than I found them. Some might say that is not much of a life, but it is an honest one, and I am proud of it. You should be proud, Juniper said. There is honor in that kind of life. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Juniper felt something shift between them, some barrier quietly dissolving. This man understood her in a way no one else ever had. He did not see her simplicity as a flaw but as a virtue. The feeling was revolutionary. Over the following days, Juniper found herself increasingly aware of Vaughn's presence. The way he walked, the sound of his voice, the small kindnesses he showed to her and her father. He fixed the loose board on the porch without being asked. He brought her father a special liniment for his arthritis that an old cowboy in town had recommended. He complimented her cooking not with empty flattery but with genuine appreciation, often asking for recipes or commenting on particular seasonings. For his part, Vaughn seemed equally aware of her. She caught him watching her as she hung laundry or worked in the garden, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes he would find small ways to be near her, offering to help carry water or hold tools, creating opportunities for conversation. Her father noticed, of course, and seemed pleased by the development. That young man is sweet on you, he told Juniper one afternoon when Vaughn was out of earshot. I think I might be sweet on him too, she admitted. Is that foolish? I have only known him a few weeks. Your mother and I knew after 3 days that we would marry, her father said. When it is right, you feel it in your bones. Do not overthink it, daughter. Just let your heart speak. The breakthrough came on a Sunday. Vaughn had completed most of the fence work and would soon need to move on to other employment. The knowledge sat between them like a stone, unspoken but heavy. That morning, Juniper invited him to attend church services with them, and he accepted. In town, they walked together to the church, and Juniper was very aware of the stares and whispers. Catherine Wells looked particularly scandalized to see the simple ranch girl accompanied by a rough cowboy, but Vaughn seemed utterly unbothered by the attention. He held the church door for Juniper and her father, sat beside them in the pew and sang the hymns in a surprisingly pleasant baritone voice. After the service, Catherine approached them with her usual superior expression. Juniper, I see you have brought a friend to church. How quaint. Miss Wells, Juniper said evenly. This is Vaughn Novak. He has been helping with work on our ranch. Vaughn, this is Catherine Wells. Pleased to meet you, Miss Wells, Vaughn said politely, though his tone was cool. A hired hand, Catherine said, as if that explained everything. Well, I suppose we all socialize at our own level, do we not? She turned to Juniper with mock sympathy. I heard you try to join the church social committee. I hope you understand why that would not be appropriate. We need people with certain standards, certain refinements. Nothing personal, of course. Of course, Juniper said, her face burning. Vaughn stepped slightly forward, not threatening but definitely present. "Excuse me, Miss Wells, but I could not help overhearing. You think Juniper here is not refined enough for your social committee?" Catherine looked startled to be addressed directly. "Well, I did not mean to be rude, but surely you understand that there are differences in breeding and education that matter in certain situations." "I see." Vaughn's voice remained polite but had gained an edge. "And these standards of yours, do they include looking down on people who work for a living? Insulting folks who show you nothing but courtesy? Making others feel small to make yourself feel big?" "I never said anything of the sort." Catherine's face flushed red. "You did not have to say it outright. Your meaning was clear enough." He turned to Juniper. "You ready to head home? I think we have had enough refined society for one day." They walked away together, leaving Catherine sputtering behind them. Juniper's heart was pounding, though whether from embarrassment or something else she could not say. "You did not have to do that," she said when they were out of earshot. "Yes, I did. I could not stand there and let her talk to you that way." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Juniper, I have been trying to find the right time to say this, but there never seems to be a perfect moment, so I am just going to say it plain. I have feelings for you. Real feelings. I know I am just a cowboy with nothing to my name, and you deserve better than that, but I cannot leave here without telling you the truth." Her father had very diplomatically continued walking toward the wagon, giving them a moment of privacy despite the public setting. "You think you have nothing to offer," Juniper said, her voice shaking. "Vaughn, you are the only person who has ever made me feel like being simple was not something to be ashamed of. You have shown me more respect and kindness in these few weeks than most people have shown me in my whole life. You work hard, you are honest, you are gentle with animals and people alike. How can you think that is nothing? You have feelings for me too." He looked almost afraid to hope. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I do." He smiled then, that transformative smile that made him handsome. "Then may I court you properly? I know things are backwards, with me already living on your property and all, but I want to do this right. I would like that very much." He took her hand, right there on the street in front of half of Ardmore, and the touch sent warmth through her entire body. Let Catherine Wells and all the rest of them gossip. This simple, honest connection meant more than all their refined opinions combined. The courtship developed naturally over the following weeks. Vaughn finished the fence work, but her father found other projects to keep him employed. The barn needed new shingles. The well needed to be deepened. There was always something that needed doing on a ranch, and now there was also the unspoken understanding that they all wanted Vaughn to stay. He was careful with Juniper's reputation, never doing anything that could be considered improper. But they spent time together every day, talking and sharing the simple work of the ranch. He taught her a better way to throw a rope. She taught him her mother's recipe for apple pie. They read books together in the evenings, sometimes aloud, enjoying the stories and discussing them afterward. One evening, Vaughn shared more about his philosophy of life. They were sitting by the creek that ran through the eastern edge of the property, watching the water flow over smooth stones. "When I was younger, I used to think I needed to become someone important," he said. "Rich, or powerful, or at least well-respected. I thought that was what it meant to be a man, to make something of yourself. What changed your mind? I worked for a man once who had all those things. He owned a huge ranch, had money in the bank. Everyone in town tipped their hats to him. But he was miserable. He had 3 wives leave him because he cared more about accumulating wealth than about being a decent husband. His children would not speak to him. He died alone in a big empty house full of expensive things that meant nothing. That is sad. It is. But it taught me something important, Success is not about how much you own or how impressive you seem to others. It is about the quality of your relationships, the peace in your heart, the simple joy of a job well done. I would rather have a small cabin and someone who loves me than a mansion and a house full of people who only pretend to care. Juniper leaned her head on his shoulder. Simple love is the truest kind. Exactly. He put his arm around her, holding her close. Everything real is simple at its core. Complicated usually just means dishonest. As summer gave way to early fall, they grew closer still. Her father's health was declining, and Vaughn took on more and more of the ranch work without complaint. He had become essential to their operation, but more than that, he had become family. Her father treated him like the son he had never had, teaching him the specific challenges of their land, the history of the herd, the small details that mattered. One evening in late September, after her father had gone to bed, Vaughn asked Juniper to walk with him. He led her to the top of a small rise on their property where you could see for miles across the Oklahoma landscape. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the first stars were beginning to appear. "I have been thinking about the future," Vaughn said quietly. "About what I want my life to look like." "And what do you want?" Juniper asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "I want this." He gestured at the land around them. "Not riches or status or anything fancy, just honest work, a simple home, and someone to share it with. I want to wake up every morning beside the woman I love and know that we built something real together. I want to raise children who understand the value of simplicity, who judge people by their character rather than their possessions." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Juniper Emmett, I know I should probably wait longer before asking this. I know we have only been courting a few months, but I also know my heart, and I know it belongs to you. Would you marry me? Would you let me spend my life showing you every day that simple love is enough?" Tears streamed down Juniper's face, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Vaughn, I will marry you." He kissed her then, a gentle kiss full of promise and tenderness. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I do not have a ring to give you," he admitted. "I will get one as soon as I can save up enough money." "I do not need a ring. I just need you. See, that right there is why I love you. Most women would be disappointed not to have a ring, but you understand what really matters." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they told her father the news, he laughed with delight and hugged them both. "I was wondering when you would get around to asking," he said to Vaughn. "I have been ready to call you son for weeks now." They planned a simple wedding for November after the fall work was done. Juniper did not want a big fuss or an expensive celebration. She invited Mrs. Patterson and her family, a few other friends from church, and that was all. The ceremony would be at the church, followed by a simple meal at the ranch. Catherine Wells heard about the engagement, of course. News traveled fast in a small town. She made a point of approaching Juniper at the general store one day. "I heard you are marrying that cowboy," she said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "I suppose it is for the best. A simple man for a simple woman. You are well matched in that regard." Once, such words would have hurt Juniper deeply. But now, with Vaughn's love secure in her heart, she found she did not care what Catherine Wells thought. "You are right," she said calmly. "We are well matched. We both value honesty, hard work, and treating people with respect. I am very lucky to have found him." Catherine seemed taken aback by this response, having clearly expected shame or anger. "Well, I wish you happiness, I suppose. Thank you. I hope you find the same someday." She walked away feeling lighter than air. Catherine's opinion simply did not matter anymore. What mattered was the life she and Vaughn would build together, the simple, honest love they shared. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, crisp and clear as only November in Oklahoma can be. Juniper wore a new dress she had made herself, white cotton with lace at the collar that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew. It was not fancy, but it was pretty, and when she saw the look in Vaughn's eyes as she walked down the aisle, she knew she had never looked more beautiful. Vaughn wore his best clothes, which were not much fancier than his everyday wear, but he had gotten a haircut and shaved carefully, and he looked handsome and nervous and perfect. When they spoke their vows, his voice shook with emotion. "I promise to love you in the simple, honest way that you deserve," he said, holding her hands. "I promise to work hard every day to provide for our family. I promise to always see your worth, even when others might not. I promise to build a life with you based on what really matters." Juniper's own vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to create a home full of peace and love. I promise to never ask you to be anything other than who you are. I promise to treasure the simple life we will share." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them married, Vaughn kissed her with such joy that the whole congregation laughed and applauded. They were husband and wife now, bound together by love and commitment. The celebration at the ranch was simple but happy. Mrs. Patterson had helped Juniper prepare food, and there was plenty for everyone. People ate and talked and congratulated the newlyweds. Even Sarah, Mrs. Patterson's daughter-in-law, was there with her husband Michael, and she hugged Juniper warmly. "I am so happy for you," Sarah said. "You and Vaughn are perfect together. I could see it even at church that first time." "Thank you for being my friend," Juniper said. "It has meant a lot to have someone who understands." As the sun set on their wedding day, the guests departed, leaving Juniper and Vaughn alone with her father. He hugged them both and then tactfully announced he was very tired and would be going to bed early. "The house is yours tonight," he said with a wink. "I will sleep soundly and not hear a thing." Vaughn and Juniper laughed, both blushing. When they were finally alone, Vaughn took her hands and looked at her with such love that she felt her breath catch. "I cannot believe you are my wife," he said softly. "I keep thinking I will wake up and discover this was all a dream." "It is real," she assured him. "We are real. This simple, honest love we have is real." He kissed her then, and this kiss was different from the gentle ones before. This was the kiss of a husband claiming his wife, full of passion and promise. She responded with equal fervor, no longer needing to hold back. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a discovery of each other that felt natural and right. Afterward, lying in Vaughn's arms in the bed that was now theirs to share, Juniper felt completely at peace. "Are you happy?" Vaughn asked, stroking her hair. "More than I ever imagined I could be." "Good. That is all I want, to make you happy every day for the rest of our lives." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Her father's health continued to decline, and by the spring of 1884 he was largely bedridden. Juniper cared for him with devotion, and Vaughn took on all the ranch work, sometimes hiring temporary help when the work was too much for one man. But they faced these challenges together, supporting each other through the difficult days. Her father passed away peacefully in his sleep in June, with both Juniper and Vaughn at his side. It was a terrible loss, but also a relief to know he was no longer in pain. At the funeral, many people from town came to pay their respects, and several commented on how fortunate Mr. Emmett had been to have such a devoted daughter and son-in-law. "Your father knew how much you loved him," Mrs. Patterson told Juniper, "and he was so proud of you and Vaughn. He told me just last month that he could die happy knowing you were well cared for." With her father's passing, Juniper and Vaughn became the sole owners of the ranch. They continued the simple operation, never trying to expand beyond their means but always working to improve what they had. Vaughn proved to be an excellent rancher with good instincts for cattle and land management. Under his care, their small herd grew slowly but steadily. In the fall of 1884, Juniper realized she was pregnant. She told Vaughn one evening after supper, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with joy, then immediately set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "Careful," he said. "I should not be throwing you around in your condition." "I am pregnant, not fragile," she said, laughing, "but I appreciate the concern." "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby, a child to raise and love and teach about what really matters in life." "A simple life," Juniper said. "The truest kind," he agreed. The pregnancy was not easy. Juniper suffered from terrible morning sickness in the first months and fatigue throughout. But Vaughn was endlessly patient and supportive, taking on extra household tasks without complaint and making sure she rested as much as possible. He would read to her in the evenings, his hand on her growing belly, talking to their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have together. In late May of 1885, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, with only the doctor and Mrs. Patterson to help since there was no hospital in Ardmore. But finally, after 20 hours, a healthy baby boy entered the world, crying lustily. "You have a son," the doctor announced, placing the baby in Juniper's arms. She looked down at the tiny red face, the small fists waving in the air, and felt her heart expand to contain more love than she had known was possible. When Vaughn came in to meet his child, he had tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Vaughn whispered, touching one tiny hand with a gentle finger. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas after Juniper's father and called him Tommy. He was a good baby, easy-tempered and healthy, and he quickly became the center of their world. Vaughn was a devoted father, involving himself in every aspect of Tommy's care despite some people's views that such things were women's work. "He is my son," Vaughn said when someone commented on seeing him change a diaper. "Why would I not want to care for him?" As Tommy grew from baby to toddler, Vaughn taught him about the ranch, carrying him around to see the cattle and horses, pointing out birds and plants, explaining how everything worked together. It was clear that he wanted his son to understand the value of the simple, honest life they led. In the spring of 1887, Juniper became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter was born in January of 1888, in the middle of a mild winter. They named her Rose after the wild roses that grew along the creek each summer. Rose was different from Tommy, more demanding and temperamental, but also full of energy and joy. She kept them busy from the moment she arrived, but neither Juniper nor Vaughn would have traded her for anything. Their family felt complete now, 2 children to love and raise. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The ranch did well enough to keep them fed and clothed with a little extra for savings. Tommy started school in Ardmore when he turned 6, and he proved to be a bright student, inheriting both his father's love of learning and his mother's practical intelligence. Rose was still too young for school, but she followed her mother around the ranch, learning cooking and gardening and all the skills a ranch woman needed. One day in the summer of 1890, when Tommy was 5 and Rose was 2, Catherine Wells came to the ranch. She arrived in a fine carriage, wearing an expensive dress and looking utterly out of place in the dusty ranch yard. Juniper came out to greet her, wiping flour from her hands. "Catherine, this is unexpected. I hope you do not mind the intrusion." Catherine looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for her. I wanted to speak with you about something. Come inside. I will make coffee." They sat at the simple kitchen table, and Catherine looked around at the plain furnishings with an expression that might have been wistfulness. "You have a lovely home," she said quietly. "Thank you, it suits us. I heard you have 2 children now, a boy and a girl." "Yes, Tommy is 5 and Rose is 2. They keep us busy." Catherine was quiet for a moment, then said, "I came to apologize for the way I treated you all those years ago and the things I said. It was cruel and wrong, and I am sorry." Juniper was surprised into silence for a moment. "What brought this on?" "I got married last year. To a man my father approved of, a banker from St. Louis with money and status. I thought I would be happy, that having everything proper and refined would make me content." She looked down at her hands. "But I am miserable. My husband cares more about his business than about me. We live in a fine house, but it feels empty. And then I heard about you, about how happy you are with your cowboy husband and your simple ranch life, and I realized that you had figured out what I never did." "What is that?" "That the trappings do not matter. That simple love, honest love, is worth more than all the fancy things in the world." Catherine looked up with tears in her eyes. "You tried to tell me that in your way, but I was too foolish to listen." Juniper reached across the table and took Catherine's hand. "I forgive you, and I am sorry that you are unhappy. But it is not too late, you know. You can still choose differently." "Can I? I made my choices. Choices can be changed. If you are truly unhappy, you do not have to stay that way." They talked for a long time, and when Catherine left, she seemed lighter somehow, as if confessing her mistakes had lifted a weight. Juniper never knew what became of her after that, whether she found the courage to change her life or not. But she hoped that Catherine found some measure of peace. That evening she told Vaughn about the visit, and he shook his head in wonder. "People have a hard time seeing what is right in front of them sometimes. We have been telling folks all along that simple is better, but they do not believe it until they have tried the complicated way and found it wanting." "Do you ever regret it?" Juniper asked. "The simple life we lead. Do you ever wish for more?" "Never." His answer was immediate and firm. "I have everything I need right here. A wife I love, children who make me proud, work that matters, and peace in my heart. What more could any man want?" "Nothing," she agreed, kissing him. "Nothing at all." As the years passed, their love only deepened. They faced the usual challenges of ranch life: harsh weather, difficult cattle, money troubles in lean years. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each trial overcome. They were true partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other's strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. Tommy grew into a thoughtful, capable young man who loved the ranch and wanted nothing more than to follow in his father's footsteps. Rose was more adventurous, talking about becoming a teacher or maybe even a doctor someday. Vaughn and Juniper encouraged both children to pursue their dreams while also instilling the values they held dear: honesty, hard work, simplicity, and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1894, Vaughn gave Juniper a simple silver band to wear alongside her wedding ring. It was not expensive or fancy, but he had saved for months to buy it, and it meant the world to her. 10 years, he said as he slipped it on her finger. 10 years of the simplest, truest love I could have imagined. Here is to 50 more. 50 more, she agreed, tears in her eyes. At least. They stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, their children playing in the yard, their cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. It was a simple scene, nothing that would impress the Catherine Wells of the world. But it was everything that mattered. "Do you remember what you told me that night before we were married?" Juniper asked. "About simple love being the truest kind." "I do." "You were right. About everything. This simple life we have built together is worth more than all the wealth and status in the world." "It is," he agreed, pulling her close, "and I would not trade a single moment of it." The years continued to pass in their steady rhythm. Tommy married a local girl named Anna in 1898, and they started their own ranch nearby with help from Vaughn and Juniper. Rose went off to teaching school in 1902 and came back 2 years later as Miss Rose Novak, ready to educate the children of Ardmore. She eventually married a doctor and had 3 children of her own. Vaughn and Juniper became grandparents multiple times over, and they loved spoiling their grandchildren while also teaching them the values that had guided their own lives. They showed the children how to care for animals, how to work the land, how to treat others with respect regardless of wealth or status. In 1910, Oklahoma Territory became Oklahoma State, and Ardmore continued to grow and change. The railroad brought more people, more businesses, more of everything. But out on the Novak Ranch, life remained relatively unchanged. The work was the same, the land was the same, and the love that had sustained Juniper and Vaughn for nearly 30 years was as strong as ever. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies slowing down. But their hearts remained young, still capable of joy and wonder and deep affection. They would sit on the porch on summer evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, and feel grateful for every moment they had shared. "You remember when we first met?" Juniper asked one such evening. She was 62 now, and Vaughn was 67, but to each other, they were still the young people who had fallen in love over fence repairs and simple meals. "I remember thinking you were the most genuine person I had ever met," Vaughn said. "No pretense, no games, just honest and real. I remember watching you fix that horse's bridle in town and thinking that any man who was that gentle with animals must be a good person. We were right about each other. We were." In 1915, they celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. It was a joyful occasion, full of laughter and love and good food. As Juniper looked around at the family she and Vaughn had created together, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and she and Vaughn were alone again, he took her in his arms and danced with her in the kitchen, humming a tune he remembered from their wedding day. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you since the day I met you, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," she whispered. "You gave me everything I needed when you taught me that simple love is the truest kind. You made me see my own worth, and you have spent every day since proving that you meant it. You made me believe in home," he said. "Before you, I was just drifting, never settling anywhere, but you gave me a reason to stay, a place to belong. You made me understand what really matters in life." They continued to dance in their simple kitchen, 2 people who had chosen each other and had never regretted that choice for a single moment. Outside, the Oklahoma wind whispered through the grass, and the stars came out one by one, and the land they had worked together for so many years settled into peaceful darkness. In 1918, Vaughn's health began to decline. He had always been strong and vital, but the years of hard work and the natural process of aging caught up with him. Juniper cared for him with the same devotion he had always shown her, making sure he was comfortable, reading to him in the evenings, holding his hand through the difficult days. "I am sorry," he said one day. "I wanted to live forever with you." "You have given me more than a lifetime of love already," she assured him, "and we will have forever anyway, just in a different way." "Promise me something," he said, his voice weak but still filled with emotion. "Promise me you will tell people our story. Tell them that simple love is real, that it lasts, that it is worth choosing over everything else. I promise. Vaughn Novak passed away peacefully in March of 1919, with Juniper holding his hand and their children gathered around. He was 71 years old and had lived a full, rich life. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he had touched, families he had worked for, children he had taught, neighbors he had helped. Everyone spoke of his kindness, his integrity, his unwavering devotion to his family. Juniper grieved deeply, but she also felt blessed to have had 34 years with a man who had truly loved her, who had seen her worth when others had not, who had built a beautiful life with her based on the simple truths they both valued. She remained on the ranch, with Tommy and his family moving in to help her manage the work. She lived to be 83 years old, and in those years after Vaughn's death, she did exactly what she had promised. She told their story to anyone who would listen. She told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about how she had been rejected for her simplicity, and how a cowboy had told her that simple love was the truest kind. She told them about the life she and Vaughn had built together, about the values they had lived by, about the deep, abiding joy that came from choosing what was real over what was impressive. "Never be ashamed of being simple," she would say. "Never think that you need to be fancy or sophisticated to be worthy of love. The most important things in life are simple: honesty, kindness, hard work, and love that does not depend on circumstances or possessions. Your grandfather taught me that, and it was the most valuable lesson I ever learned." When Juniper died peacefully in her sleep in 1934, she was surrounded by multiple generations of family who had all been shaped by the example she and Vaughn had set. Their ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose simple, true love over everything else. The story of Juniper and Vaughn became something of a legend in Ardmore. People told it to their children and grandchildren, a reminder that the best things in life are often the simplest, that true love does not need fancy trappings, and that a person's worth has nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with character and heart. The old ranch house still stood decades later, a simple structure that had sheltered a simple, beautiful love. And on quiet evenings, when the Oklahoma wind whispered through the grass and the stars came out over the land, some said you could still feel the presence of that love, as real and true as it had ever been. Because simple love, the kind that Vaughn and Juniper shared, does not fade with time or death. It becomes part of the land itself, part of the story of a place, part of the legacy passed down through generations. It remains as a testament to the truth that they lived by and proved through every day of their years together. That simple love is indeed the truest kind there is, and it is always, always enough.